Welcome back to Kertrats Productions, Star Trek fans. It's time for another episode review of Star Trek Discovery's 5th and final season. In this video, I'm taking a look at the latest episode, Face the Strange. I'll also be sharing the Easter eggs and canon connections I found in the episode, so let's take a look. The mission to track down the progenitor's tech has led Discovery to a seemingly empty sector of space, with nothing apparent that would help point them in the right direction. As they investigate the mystery, something begins to affect the ship's systems. As Burnham and Raynor attempt to beam back to the bridge, everything around them shifts. They are still in the ready room, but the ship itself has changed. They soon discover they have gone back in time to the end of Season 2, when Discovery was following the Red Angel, Burnham herself, into the wormhole to travel to the 32nd century. What follows is a time-twisting adventure that takes Burnham and Raynor to various points throughout Discovery's history, and even at one point into a possible future. The culprit is a so-called time bug, the device that was planted on Adira by Maul at the end of the last episode. The time bug, or Krenim chronophage, unsticks Discovery in time and flashes it to various time periods. Because Raynor and Burnham were beaming when it started, they remain unaffected while the crew around them are still living in the moment. There is one other person who is mostly unaffected, Stamets, who, thanks to his tardigrade DNA, is immune to temporal shenanigans. Together, he, Burnham, and Raynor must figure out a way to get Discovery out of the time trap before Mol and Locke have too much of a lead on them. I really enjoyed this episode for the most part. Temporal shenanigans are, at this point, pretty much baked into the DNA of Star Trek, and this episode feels like it fits quite well with many of those adventures. In fact, I would say that Face the Strange has a distinctly Voyager feel to it, even beyond the remarkable parallels between this episode and the Voyager Season 7 episode Shattered. In that episode, Voyager itself is split into a number of different time zones, each one featuring a different period of Voyager's history. Like that episode, Face the Strange takes place in its series' final season, and almost feels like an homage to the series itself, featuring a number of the greatest hits from the past 4 seasons. One time period encountered by Book and Burnham doesn't fall within the series' past, however, but rather a possible future of Discovery. The ship is abandoned, her crew having been lost long ago. Outside Discovery sits the shattered remains of Federation headquarters. This is the end result should Burnham and her crew fail to secure the progenitor's technology. This also felt familiar for a variety of reasons. First, Star Trek has often used a glimpse of a possible future to underscore the stakes of a particular storyline. My mind goes specifically to the destruction of Earth at the hands of the Xindi, as seen in the Enterprise episode Twilight. Second, was anyone else reminded of the Short Trek's episode Calypso? There are a number of similarities here. A Discovery long abandoned by her crew, Zora by herself with no one to talk to, and even the use of music serves as a reminder of the events of that Short Trek's episode. As I speculated back in Season 4, when it was said that Zora now has the ability to dream, I believe that this episode cements the events of Calypso as a dream that Zora has, very likely while experiencing this state of limbo that we see here. When Burnham and Raynor first appear to Zora in this time frame, she says that she thought it was another dream. I believe this is a roundabout way of referring to the events of Calypso as a dream that she had in the interim between the loss of Discovery's crew and the moments we see in this episode. Is this the most satisfying conclusion to the Calypso plot thread? No, probably not, but I think it works for me. Would I like to have seen a more concrete explanation for the events of Calypso taking place in the real world rather than it being a dream? Yeah, I definitely think that I would, but given that this is the final season, and they didn't know it was the final season when they were making the majority of it, I expect this might be the best we get on the subject. The emotional core of the episode comes when Burnham, Raynor, and Stamets find themselves in the time frame of Season 1 of Discovery, shortly after Burnham came aboard the ship as a convicted mutineer. I enjoyed Burnham confronting herself, and Sonequa Martin-Green did a very good job of playing her younger, more troubled self. The fight between the two of them brings a whole new meaning to self-hating. Seeing Burnham at this stage is a great reminder of how far her character has come over the course of the series. I also very much enjoyed Burnham demonstrating how it's the connection that has been built between the characters that will save the day, a lesson that Raynor takes to heart when he has to convince Rhys to allow them to complete their mission. The resolution to the problem is sufficiently technobabbly enough to convince me, and eventually they set everything right by destroying the time bug and returning Discovery to its proper point in time. Other things in this episode that I really enjoyed was seeing lots of Tig Notaro as Jet Reno. I especially liked her scene with Stamets, where we got to see some of their classic back and forth. I also think the writers specifically gave Reno a ton of technobabble in that scene just to mess with Tig, who has said that she has a really tough time with that particular quirk of Trek acting. She did, however, do a stand-up job getting all of that technobabble out. It was also great to see Arium again, as well as the dynamic of that first season cast with the darkened bridge, a hallmark of Lorca's command of Discovery. However, with the exception of a brief snippet of Saru's voice over comms, Doug Jones is completely absent from this episode, and his presence is very much missed. Last episode, when they said they were going to Zenkethi space and that it would be up to the diplomats to figure that out, I thought that Saru would play a part in that. I guess not. Let's move on to the Easter eggs and canon connections in the episode. The title of the episode, Face the Strange, is a reference to the David Bowie song Changes, appropriate for an episode where our heroes are trying not to change the timeline. It also strikes me as drawing attention to the myriad changes that Discovery has gone through over the course of the series, illustrated beautifully in this episode. At the beginning of the episode, Mull and Locke are shown purchasing the time bug. They pay the dealer with latinum, a currency first seen in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, although not usually tainted with poison as it is here. The time bug itself is said by Rayner to be a Krenim chronophage left over from the temporal wars. The Krenim were first seen in Star Trek Voyager, and their Imperium used temporal weapons such as chronoton torpedoes, as well as a superweapon that could erase things from history. It seems that their expertise in all things time-related continues. Stamets' ability to exist outside of normal space-time stems from his incorporation of the tardigrade DNA in Season 1. We first saw this ability of his when he was unaffected by the time loop in the episode Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. Burnham mentions the Temporal Prime Directive, which prohibits time-traveling Starfleet officers from affecting history in any way that might disrupt the future. Which brings up something that I didn't quite catch the first time I watched this episode, but makes more sense on a second watch. When the three officers are interacting with people in past time frames, this episode makes it clear that once the time bug resets and shifts them to a new time frame, the changes that have been made become permanent. The only time frame that doesn't get permanently changed is the final one, because they break the cycle before the time bug can reset. Therefore, Jet Reno did actually meet Rayner during the battle with Osiris forces. Burnham and Rayner really were on the bridge while Discovery traversed the wormhole at the end of Season 2. I'm not saying that any of that is a problem or anything, just something that strikes me as very interesting. When Burnham encounters a past version of Book, he mentions Raktajino, a Klingon coffee that the crew of Discovery seems to be learning to love as much as the crew of Deep Space Nine did. And when Burnham fights Burnham in the Discovery corridor, they use Vulcan martial arts, a fighting style known as Susmana, first introduced in the Enterprise Season 2 episode Marauders. Finally, here's a quick overview of each time period that Burnham and Rayner visit. Jump number 1 is following the Red Angel into the wormhole to the 32nd century in the Season 2 finale Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2. Jump 2 is to a point at which Discovery was still under construction at the San Francisco Fleet Yards. You know, everywhere Starfleet related just has a really great view of that bridge. Jump 3 is also to Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2, when Discovery and Enterprise are battling the Section 31 AI Control. Jump 4 is to Osira's attack on Discovery at the end of Season 3, in the episode That Hope Is You Part 2. Jump 5 is to the aforementioned future scenario with Zora and Discovery abandoned amid the ruins of Federation headquarters. Jump 6 seems to be to sometime in Season 2, without anything linking it to a specific episode, unless I missed something in Reno and Stamets' dialogue that points to a particular event. If you picked up on that, please let me know in the comments. Jump 7 is to a point either between Seasons 3 and 4, or very early in Season 4. Burnham has only just recently become captain of Discovery. And finally, Jump 8 is to a point fairly early in Season 1. Lorca is in command, Saru is first officer, and mention is also made of Commander Landry, who was killed in episode 4, so this takes place before that. Burnham has only recently arrived on Discovery in this time period, and is still very much unsure of herself and her place on the ship. We also see Arium, who in this episode is played by Hannah Cheeseman, reprising her role from Season 2. In Season 1, Arium was actually played by Sarah Middich, who would go on to play Nilsson in Season 2 and beyond. References made to Arium's death in the Season 2 episode Project Daedalus. Also on the Discovery Bridge in this time period is Lieutenant Bryce, whom we haven't seen since The Galactic Barrier, episode 10 of Season 4. And that was all of the canon connections and Easter eggs I found. What did I miss? Please let me know in the comments. And what did you think of Face the Strange? I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you as always to the Patreon supporters, and to everyone else, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you taking the time. Please like the video if you liked it, share it with anyone you think might enjoy it, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next week for another Discovery review and my regular Monday video, This Week in Trek. Live long and prosper.